I was cut off by the grandparents who raised me for almost 18 years because I married someone outside our religion. Last month they suddenly missed me enough to call. Turns out my grandmother's kidneys are failing, and they wanted to know if I, or my children, could be a match. Yeah. That phone call hit different once I learned the truth. Growing up in their house. My name is Megan, I am in my late 30s now, and I live with my husband and our 2 kids in a small suburb outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. But for a long time, my whole world was my grandparents' house on Pine Ridge Drive. When I was 10, my parents were killed in a pile-up on the highway just outside town. One minute I was in the back seat arguing with my little brother about whose turn it was to hold the Game Boy, and the next minute there were flashing lights, sirens, and a nurse gently pulling me away from 2 covered bodies. My brother didn't make it either. It was just me. My dad's parents, Frank and Helen, stepped in almost immediately. They were in their early 60s then, thinking about downsizing and retirement, and instead they took custody of a grieving 4th grader who woke up screaming most nights. I will always be grateful that they did that. They didn't have to. I could have ended up bouncing around foster homes. Instead, I got a bedroom at the end of their hallway, a packed lunch for school, clean clothes, and people who called me ours. That part is real. And I don't want to erase it. But that doesn't mean everything that followed was good or healthy. Frank was a retired Army sergeant who never really took the uniform off in his mind. He brought that same, my way or the highway, mentality right into the living room. He believed our branch of religion was the only real one on earth. Everything we did, what we wore, what we ate, what we listened to, who we talked to, had to fit through that filter. There were rules for everything. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts, even in August when Oklahoma felt like the surface of the sun. Skirts had to hit mid-calf or lower. No sleeveless tops. If my shoulders or upper arms were visible, I was inviting trouble. Helen braided my hair every morning and every night. If any strand fell out during the day, I'd hear about it. She used to say, "You keep yourself neat for the Lord, not for boys," while yanking the brush through my tangles. After school, I was to come straight home. No stopping at a friend's house. No going for ice cream with classmates. No hanging around the parking lot. If my bus was even 5 minutes late, Frank was at the door checking his watch. Inside the house, he treated everything like an inspection. Every evening after dinner, he'd have me bring my backpack to the dining table. He'd lay my notebooks and graded papers out in a row like evidence. Anything that wasn't an A got a lecture, anything below a B meant I went to bed without dinner, to think about my priorities. I still remember nights lying on my mattress, stomach growling, listening to the muffled sounds of the TV in the living room. My room had to be spotless. That wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. The bed had to be made tight enough to bounce a coin, just like he had learned in the barracks. Clothes had to be hung in color order. Books had to be lined up on the shelf by size. If he walked in and found so much as a sweatshirt on the back of a chair, he'd make me stand in front of him and smack my palms 12 times with this thick, cracked leather belt he kept rolled up in his dresser. "Pain teaches faster than words," he'd say. Helen wasn't cruel in the same way, but she was worn down and scared of him. She did what he said. If she disagreed, she'd wait until he left the room, then quietly bring me an extra sandwich or stroke my hair while she thought I was asleep. But she never stood between us. Friends were complicated. In middle school, everyone was forming little groups, going to birthday parties at the skating rink on Jefferson Avenue, having sleepovers, that sort of thing. I was allowed to go to exactly 2 birthday parties my entire childhood, and only because Frank knew the families from church and had met their fathers. Any friend who didn't go to our church? Off limits. If a girl in my class mentioned that she celebrated other holidays, or that her family didn't believe in God, or that her mom worked nights at the bar, that was it. "You're not going to her house," he'd say. And she sure as hell isn't coming to mine. When I turned 17, I asked if I could take driver's edition. Everyone else in my grade seemed to already have their permits. Teachers were letting kids move their own cars during band practice. I was chomping at the bit to get some kind of independence. Frank shut it down with one sentence: "Women don't belong behind the wheel." He wasn't joking. He told me if God wanted women to operate machinery, he'd have made the Bible different. That my future husband would be responsible for getting me where I needed to go. That girls who drive end up in ditches or in trouble. He said it like it was a fact, like saying the sky is blue. Looking back now, it sounds insane. But when you grow up with only one version of reality, you just accept it. I thought everyone's dad or granddad checked their backpacks and decided what shirts they could wear. It wasn't until college that the cracks really started to show. Fighting for college. Frank's plan for my life was simple and, to him, perfect: graduate high school, stay home, and marry a young man from our congregation. He'd been eyeing one in particular, the son of his old friend Pastor Bill. I'll call the guy Ethan. Ethan was nice enough, I guess. Polite. Quiet. He helped his dad with church events and worked part-time at the hardware store on Main Street. But we had nothing in common. Being around him felt like sitting in a waiting room with no magazines. I wanted more. I'd always liked school, even with the pressure. I loved reading and writing, and my teachers had told me repeatedly I should think about college. It was the one thing in my life that felt like it belonged to me. When I told Frank I wanted to apply to Red River State University over in Norman, he laughed. "What for?" he asked. "Degree isn't going to keep you warm at night. Husband will." I explained scholarships, financial aid, the programs they had. I told him I could commute from home at first. I told him I could work part-time. I laid it all out logically. He still said no. We fought about it for months. I cried more that year than I care to remember. Helen stayed out of it officially, but once, when he had gone to bed, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Keep asking." Sometimes he gives in when he's tired. Eventually, I wore him down. "You can go to that school," he said one evening, not looking up from his newspaper. "But you are not moving into any dorm. You come home every night. You attend services on Wednesdays and Sundays. And you remember who's putting a roof over your ungrateful head." It wasn't exactly the freedom I pictured, but it was a crack in the wall. I signed the acceptance letter the next day. Meeting Jason and seeing a different kind of family. I met my husband, Jason, in my sophomore year. We were both in an early morning sociology class neither of us really wanted to be in, but needed for credit. First day, I showed up 10 minutes early because Frank raised me to believe, on time means late. Jason showed up 10 minutes late, no binder, hair still damp from the shower, and slid into the open seat beside me with a sheepish grin. "Is this seat taken?" he whispered. I shook my head and kept my eyes on my notebook because that's what shy girls who've been told not to talk to boys do. Over the next few weeks, we ended up paired for a group project, and he slowly wore down my walls without even realizing it. He cracked jokes, but not in a way that made anyone the butt of them. He offered me half his granola bar when I forgot breakfast. He asked real questions and actually listened to the answers. I'd never met a guy my age who wasn't trying to impress me or correct me. He just met me where I was. We started studying together in the library. That turned into dumping change into the vending machine and splitting Diet Cokes. Then it turned into grabbing cheap tacos on Lincoln Street after class. Then one night he walked me to my rattly old bus and kissed me on the cheek and my entire brain went offline. At some point, friend quietly shifted to boyfriend. The whole time, I kept him and my life with him in a separate box from my grandparents. He knew I lived with them and that they were strict. I did not tell him just how strict. I didn't tell them about him at all. The first time I went to his house, I thought my chest was going to explode. I was so nervous. His parents, Mike and Carol, lived in a one-story brick house on Maple Lane with mismatched patio chairs and a yard that looked lived in, not manicured. There were kids' drawings on the fridge from Jason's little cousins, a bit of dog hair on the couch, and a blanket tossed over the back of the recliner. It felt like a real home. Carol hugged me within 10 seconds of meeting me. Mike shook my hand, then immediately asked if I wanted a burger because he'd just fired up the grill. They didn't grill me about my religion. They didn't ask what kind of values I had or what my grades were like. They asked about my favorite books, my major, whether I liked dogs. When Jason put a hand on my shoulder at dinner, nobody side-eyed us. Nobody cleared their throat or quoted scripture. They just passed the potato salad. It blew my mind. I'd never seen a husband wash dishes next to his wife without being nagged. I'd never seen parents disagree and handle it without yelling. I'd never seen a family pray before dinner without it feeling like a pop quiz. I think I fell in love with Jason's family at the same time I fell in love with him. Choosing my own life. I kept my relationship with Jason to myself all the way through college. I knew exactly what would happen if Frank found out I was dating someone who wasn't from our church, didn't follow our religion, was not the son of his friend Pastor Bill. He'd explode, forbid it, probably try to cut off my tuition money. I was not ready to burn that bridge until I had something solid under my feet. After graduation, I landed a steady job at an insurance company downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than any job I'd had before, came with health insurance, and gave me a little cushion. I started seeing what life might look like away from Pine Ridge Drive. One evening, when I was about 24, Jason took me out to the little park by the river, right when the sun was dropping low. He was fidgety in a way I'd never seen him before. He got down on one knee with a simple ring and said, "Meg, I can't picture my life without you. Will you marry me?" There wasn't a second of doubt. I said yes so fast I almost cut him off. We cried, we laughed, we called his parents. Then, reality sobered me up. I still had to tell my grandparents. The ultimatum. Frank and Helen invited me over for Sunday lunch not long after they heard I'd been spending time with a boy from school. I could tell from Helen's tone on the phone that it wasn't going to be a normal visit. When I walked in, the table was set, but nobody was smiling. Frank sat at the head of the table with his hands folded. Helen hovered by the stove, wringing a dish towel. "We need to talk," Frank said. I told them the truth, that Jason and I had been together for a few years. That I was engaged. That he was kind and hardworking. That he came from a good family. That he treated me better than anyone ever had. They didn't hear any of it. Frank's face went from stone to storm. He accused me of lying to them, said I'd used college as an excuse to sneak around. He said he'd wasted his money on my education because it just filled my head with nonsense. Helen kept dabbing at her eyes and saying, "Oh, Megan, why would you do this to us?" They told me Jason wasn't worthy of me because he wasn't from our religious background, didn't come from legacy money, and couldn't elevate our family the way a wealthier man could. Frank actually said, "You could marry someone who owns half of Rockford County, and you pick him?" I told them I didn't care about money. That I cared about how he treated me, how he respected me, how we worked together. That I wasn't a prize cow for them to trade. Frank didn't care. He leaned back in his chair and said, very calmly, "If you walk down the aisle with that man, you walk out of this family. We will not stand by while you spit on our faith." Helen begged him to calm down, but she never told him he was wrong. She told me I was breaking her heart and that my parents wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. Something in me hardened in that moment. I looked around that kitchen, at the spotless counters and the carefully arranged magnets on the fridge and the table where I'd done homework under his glare, and I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love that came with conditions. Jason loved me without those conditions. His family did too. So I stood up, smoothed my skirt with shaking hands, and said, "I'm going to marry him. I'd like you to be there. But I'm doing it either way." Frank didn't yell. He just said, "Then don't come back here again." Helen sobbed. I walked out to the sound of it, got into my car, and sat in their driveway crying so hard I couldn't see the steering wheel. But I didn't go back in. 18 years of silence. 3 months later, Jason and I got married in a small ceremony at a park in town. His parents, a few of our friends from college, and one of my co-workers were there. We had barbecue instead of fancy catering and cupcakes instead of a huge cake. There were toasts and laughter and the kind of dancing where people look silly but don't care. My grandparents' chairs stayed empty. After that, they stuck to their word. They didn't call. They didn't write. They didn't send a single card, not even when Jason and I bought our first tiny house on the other side of town off Willow Court. Not when we had our first child, our son Caleb, or our daughter Lily 3 years later. I tried, at first. I mailed them a photo from our wedding and wrote a short note on the back, telling them I loved them and hoped they'd change their minds. No response. I sent a Christmas card one year with a picture of baby Caleb in footy pajamas. Nothing. I texted my grandmother's old number when Lily was born and wrote, "It's a girl. She has your eyes. I'd love for you to meet her." The message delivered. No reply. Relatives told me that when my name came up, Frank would say, "We don't speak of her," and change the subject. Some said Helen kept a little stack of pictures I'd send in a shoebox in her closet, but she never displayed them. So I built my life without them. Jason and I worked hard. We survived layoffs and car troubles and medical bills. We also survived long lazy Saturdays, messy art projects at the kitchen table, and kids crawling into our bed at 3 a.m. after bad dreams. His parents became my true in-laws in every way. They loved my kids like they'd loved Jason and his sister. They called me just to chat. They showed up at school concerts and soccer games, not because anyone guilt them into it, but because they wanted to be there. My grandparents on my dad's side? It was like they'd died the same day my parents did. By my mid-30s, I had pretty much accepted that I would never see them again. There was still a soft, sore place inside me that missed them, the version of them I'd wanted, not the one I got, but I learned to live around it. Then my phone rang one Tuesday afternoon, and everything cracked open again. The phone call. I was at my desk at work, halfway through answering emails, when my cell buzzed. It was my cousin Rachel, one of the few relatives on that side I still talk to occasionally. "Hey, you busy?" she asked. "Kind of," I said, glancing at my inbox. "What's up?" She hesitated just long enough to make my stomach sink. "Uncle Frank called me this morning," she said. "He wanted your current number." I gave it to him, but I wanted to give you a heads up. I leaned back in my chair. "He called you?" I asked. "Out of nowhere?" "Yeah," she said. "He said he needed to speak to you." He sounded, I don't know. Not humble, that's for sure. Just determined. My heart started thudding. "Did he say why?" "No," she said. "Just that it was family business. Look, I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he finally pulled his head out of his butt. Maybe something's wrong. Just be careful, okay? You don't owe him anything." We hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time afterward. A part of me, the kid part, felt a flutter of hope. Maybe he was calling to say he was sorry. Maybe he wanted to see the kids. Maybe Helen had been asking for me. Another part of me, the adult who knew him too well, felt a heavy suspicion. Frank doesn't do apologies. He doesn't do vulnerability. He does orders, deals, and guilt. I didn't have to wait long to see which one it was. The very next evening, around dinner time, my phone lit up with a number I recognized deep in my bones. The old landline that had sat on the kitchen wall on Pine Ridge Drive, now forwarded to his cell. I stepped out onto the back porch so my kids wouldn't overhear and answered. "Hello?" Silence for a beat. Then, "Megan. It's your grandfather." Hearing his voice again after nearly 18 years felt like being yanked back in time. He sounded older, more gravelly, but still, him. "Hi," I said carefully. For a minute or two, we did awkward small talk. He asked how I was. I said I was fine. I told him I was married. He didn't comment. I told him I had 2 kids. He asked their names and ages and made a few neutral noises. He said he'd like to see them sometime. He asked if they liked school. He said he couldn't believe I was all grown up. If I didn't know him, it might have sounded sweet. But every sentence felt like it had hooks in it. Finally, I asked the question hanging over everything. "Why are you calling me now, Grandpa?" I said. "You're the one who told me not to come back. It's been almost 2 decades. What changed?" He sighed, the way he always did when someone questioned him. "Your grandmother and I are getting old," he said. "We don't have much time left. I've been thinking a lot. I made mistakes. I shouldn't have cut you off. I miss you. I'd like to see you and the kids before I go." If that had come out of Jason's dad's mouth, or even my boss's, I might have believed it. But this was Frank. The man who'd rather chew glass than admit he was wrong about anything. The man who'd never once, in my entire life, said, "I miss you," when I left for summer camp or a school trip. It didn't sit right. "I'm still married to Jason," I said flatly. "The man you disowned me over. That hasn't changed." He paused just long enough to tell me that yes, that still bothered him. "I figured," he said. "Look, I'm not calling to rehash all that. I'm calling because you're my granddaughter. I'd like you to bring the children out to the house. Maybe next weekend. Your grandmother would be glad to see you." "What about my husband?" I asked. "Does he get an invitation too?" His answer was immediate. "I'd prefer if he didn't come," he said. "This is family. I don't need strangers under my roof." My jaw clenched. "He is my husband. He is the father of your great-grandchildren. He is not a stranger. He's not one of us," Frank said. "I don't have to like him or pretend he belongs. You and the little ones are my blood. That's enough." And there it was. The same line drawn, just wrapped in different words. I took a breath. "If you can't show basic respect to my husband, then there's nothing to talk about," I said. "We're a package deal. All 4 of us, or none of us." He didn't like that at all. "You're trying to force my hand," he snapped. "You've always been stubborn. I'm extending an olive branch and you're slapping it away. You can visit your grandparents without dragging that man along." I kept my voice as calm as I could. "You severed this relationship," I said. "If you want to rebuild it, you don't get to dictate terms that insult my family. Think about that." We went back and forth a few more minutes. Every time I said, "Jason," he said, "That man." Every time I said, "My husband," he said, "Outsider." Finally, I said, "I have to go," and finished the call. After that, he started calling more often. When I stopped picking up, he left voicemails. Some were angry, "You owe me the decency of hearing me out. I raised you when nobody else would." Some were pitiful, "Your grandmother cries at night. She wants to see you. Don't be cruel." Don't let your pride get in the way. I didn't respond. Something still felt off. The timing, the sudden urgency, the way he kept saying, "We don't have much time." A week later, I found out why. The real reason. Rachel called again on a Sunday afternoon. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "I can be," I said, sinking onto the couch. "I went to see Grandma Helen yesterday," she said. "She's in St. Mary's Medical Center over on Oak Hill Road. She's not doing well, Megan." My chest tightened. "What's going on?" I asked. "Her kidneys are failing," she said. "They've got her on dialysis 3 times a week. The doctors told them she needs a transplant if she's going to have a shot at any kind of decent life." A wave of sadness hit me. I pictured Helen's hands, the way they used to braid my hair, the way they shook a little even back then when she poured coffee. "Oh," I said quietly. "I had no idea." "I figured you didn't," Rachel said. "Anyway, while I was there, I heard Uncle Frank talking to Aunt Lisa in the hallway. He said something like, 'We have to get Megan and those kids in here for testing. They're our best chance.'" She let that hang for a second. "And that's when I understood why he suddenly wants to reconnect," she finished. "I'm sorry, Meg. I thought you needed to know." For a minute, I just sat there staring at the TV, which was frozen on some cartoon my kids had paused earlier. So it wasn't just about missing me. It wasn't just about time slipping away and wanting to make amends. He needed a kidney. And in his head, that's what my children and I were, potential donors. Potential solutions. Potential replacements for an organ. The anger that rose up in me surprised even me. I'd thought I was mostly numb. Turns out, there was still a lot of rage under there. Did I feel bad that my grandmother was sick? Of course. Did I want her to suffer? No. I'm not heartless. But the idea that they could erase 18 years of silence and pain with a few, "I miss you," lines and then expect me, or my kids, to risk surgery for them? That was a no from me. A big one. The final conversation. About a week after that, Frank called again. This time, I picked up. I was tired of guessing. "Before you say anything," I said, "I know Grandma's in kidney failure. I know she's on dialysis. I know she needs a transplant. And I know you've been talking about getting me and my kids tested." He didn't even pretend to be surprised. If anything, he sounded relieved to drop the act. "Well," he said, "then you know why I've been trying to get you out here." I swallowed. "I'm sorry she's sick," I said. "I really am. But I'm not getting tested. My kids aren't getting tested. We're not going to be donors." He went quiet for a second. Then the anger came. "You're serious?" he asked. "After everything we've done for you, you won't even see if you're a match?" "There is no we here," I said. "You made sure of that 18 years ago. You cut me off because I married someone outside our religion. You wouldn't even acknowledge my children existed. You don't get to show up now and demand a piece of my body." He launched into a speech I'd heard versions of my whole life. He talked about how he'd taken me in when my parents died, how he'd put food on the table, how he'd kept me on the straight and narrow when I could have gone wild. He said I'd thrown away the faith I was raised in for some man. He said if I'd married properly, none of this would have happened. Then he said the quiet part out loud. "If you had married a good man from our church," he said, "we never would have had to cut ties. We'd have had our family together, and maybe we wouldn't be in this situation." There it was. It was never about my happiness. It was never really about my safety or my soul. It was about control, about religion, about prejudice. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I'm ashamed to share blood with you, I said quietly. You cut me off for loving a good man who just happens to believe differently than you. You erased your own granddaughter because she wouldn't be your puppet. Now, because you want something, because you need something, you expect me to hand over part of my body like it's no big deal. He tried to pivot again. Even if you're angry with me, he said, voice rising, what about your grandmother? She fed you, clothed you, sat up with you when you had nightmares. You owe her. This isn't about religion, this is about saving a life. I don't owe her my kidney, I said. I'm sorry she's ill. I'm sad about it, actually. But I'm not responsible for saving her. And my children sure as hell aren't. He called me names then. Selfish. Ungrateful. Heartless. He said my husband had turned me against my real family. He said God would judge me for turning my back on my elders. For the first time in my life, his words just slid off. You stopped being my family when you chose your hatred over me, I said. My family is the people who show up. The ones who love my husband and my kids, not in spite of who we are, but because of it. You don't get to claim that title anymore. He sputtered. I let him talk himself in circles for another 30 seconds, then said, we're done here, and hung up. Then I blocked his number. Where that leaves me. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. Not because I regretted what I said, because I didn't, but because some part of me had still been holding out hope that maybe, deep down, he'd changed. That hope died on that call, and there's grief in that, even when you know it's for the best. Jason sat with me, held my hand, and didn't say, I told you so, even though he had warned me from the start that the timing was suspicious. Our kids chased each other around the living room, completely unaware that a man who shares their blood had referred to their father as that man, and wanted to use them as a medical resource. I still feel sad for Helen. I really do. She's an older woman in pain, hooked up to machines. She made a lot of choices too. She stood beside Frank while he cut me off, but I can separate my anger toward him from my compassion for her situation. But compassion does not equal obligation. I don't owe them my organs. I don't owe them my kids' veins or their time or their emotional energy. I don't owe them access to my life when they spent nearly 2 decades pretending I didn't exist. People keep saying, but they raised you. And they're not wrong. They did. They also shamed me, controlled me, hit me, starved me, dictated every inch of my body and mind, and then tossed me aside when I dared to build my own life. That's not a small thing. I paid my debt a long time ago. These days, when I think about family, I think about Jason making pancakes on Saturday mornings while the kids argue over who gets the first one. I think about my in-laws showing up with casseroles when I had surgery. I think about my friends from work who babysat so we could have a date night for the first time in months. Those are my people. Maybe there's a version of this story where my grandparents truly saw the error of their ways, called to apologize with no strings attached, and slowly earned back a place in my life over time. If that had happened years ago, before kidneys failed and organs were needed, maybe this would be a different conversation. But that didn't happen. They waited until they needed something. They waited until doctors said, transplant, and then went looking for the granddaughter they'd erased, not because they loved her, but because her tissue type might match. That tells me everything I need to know. So yeah, I've cut off contact. I've kept my boundaries. My kids will grow up hearing age-appropriate bits of this story, not to make them hate anyone, but to teach them what love looks like, and what it doesn't. To show them that blood doesn't give someone the right to use you. To show them it's okay to say no, even to people who think you owe them your life. Because you don't. Not your parents. Not your grandparents. Not anybody. Your body is not a bargaining chip for someone who only remembers you exist when they need a part of it.